Over the northern Atlantic right now, we're closely monitoring two tropical disturbances that have the potential of developing into Tropical Storm Emily. We have this one disturbance which is now quickly moving to the northeast thanks to a strong amount of wind shear right over it. We're seeing a strong low pressure system that's steering it very fast to the northeast, and we have another tropical disturbance that's just to the southeast of Bermuda at this time that has a pretty good possibility of developing into a tropical cyclone. And taking a look at this current disturbance right now, we do see that there isn't a lot of convection going on. It's dealing with a decent amount of wind shear as well as dry air. However, the computer models are still expecting for the convection to pick up as it continues ahead further northward, and in fact could merge with this other low-level center that's located just off the North Carolina coast, and that combination could create a more convective environment for this to potentially develop into a tropical storm. But it's still going to deal with a lot of dry air and a stronger amount of upper level winds as this continues ahead further northward. And of course, the sea surf temperatures could be an issue as well, because once this storm system moves just to the north of the Gulf Stream, that's when sea surf temperatures could drop below 80 degrees, which is below the threshold necessary for tropical cyclone development. So it's going to be a very close forecast. I'll say there's right around a medium chance, like the National Hurricane Center is stating, for this to develop. However, the good news is that it's unlikely to directly impact land. Maybe an elevated risk of rip currents right around eastern Canada, but not much to worry about when it comes to direct land impacts. And same goes for this tropical disturbance right over here. In terms of the chance, the National Hurricane Center is giving these two tropical disturbances of developing into a tropical storm. We have this disturbance, which currently has a medium 50% chance of tropical cyclone formation within the next 7 days. However, it has lowered from before because the National Hurricane Center just yesterday was expecting a high chance for tropical cyclone development with this tropical disturbance. The chance has lowered now, so this could be a trend where we're beginning to see less and less confidence from the National Hurricane Center, to the point where we could potentially see a low chance by tomorrow, or in fact no chance at all if the hostile conditions continue, and if this disturbance really doesn't start to pick up steam when it comes to convective activity, because right now it's definitely struggling with convective activity, which is the reason why the National Hurricane Center has lowered its forecast chance of this developing over the next 7 days. But it's still a medium chance, so expect pretty much right around a 50-50 chance this develops as of right now. And for this disturbance, the chance is very low. Like I said, the upper level winds are very strong over this storm, and when we see upper level winds this strong, it's really difficult for all the air molecules to converge in one area without being diverted by the strong upper level winds. So it's very unlikely that this is going to develop, and plus it's going to move over cooler waters eventually, which should only prevent it even more from having a good chance of developing. However, outside these two disturbances, we don't have nothing that there's really nothing that the National Hurricane Center is giving any chance of developing into a tropical cyclone, which is certainly good news. And in terms of what could happen in the future for the main development region, let's take a look at the computer models right now. So this is a GFS's models forecast when it comes to the relative humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, which gives a good representation of how much convective energy there will be surrounding these tropical disturbances, as well as how much dry air that would potentially inhibit this storm as it continues to potentially move northward. And taking a look at these two tropical disturbances, so for this one, we do see not only is it dealing with strong upper level winds at this time, there's plenty of dry air on the western half, so it's going to be very difficult for this to develop a well organized enough center of circulation for the wind speed to be strong on all areas for it to develop enough rotation and convection for this to develop into a tropical storm. Because one of the key things that tropical cyclones require is a closed and very well organized center circulation where the storm isn't very asymmetrical or lopsided when it comes to the wind speed. And with this much stable air on the western side of this storm, it's going to be very difficult for this to develop, along with the strong upper level winds as well as the cooler sea surface temperatures that are further northward. So I'll say the chance is very limited that this develops. However, for this tropical disturbance, we do see it's going to deal with the same issue, just plenty of dry air. However, there is that possibility that along with this low level center that's expected to move northeastward, on the tail end there's going to be an extra boost in convection, and that could potentially develop into a tropical storm. And this area should bring a high amount of convective activity to an otherwise low pressure system that you could essentially say is dying in the middle of the Atlantic. So this should help at least enhance its chances, especially later during the run where there's plenty of moisture, convective activity, and there isn't a ton of dry air entraining it. However, it's going to deal with the same issue that this storm is dealing with, which is strong upper level winds. And however, at the same time, the upper level winds, especially on the eastern side, could benefit this storm because since the upper level winds will move from a southeasterly direction, which is the same direction as the eastern half of this storm, or the stronger half of any tropical cyclone in the Atlantic, then that could strengthen the wind speed just enough on the eastern side to where maybe this could be considered a tropical storm if it were to strengthen that much. It seems like it's going to be a very difficult to say if the wind speed will reach tropical storm status on the eastern side to where it could be considered a tropical storm. And we also need to keep in mind that it's likely going to need some baroclinic influences to help strengthen this storm as it continues to head further northward, because the warm sea surface temperatures will be at a minimum here in the north, this far north of the Atlantic. So that will definitely slow down this storm, but with a little bit of help from instability, that could strengthen the convective activity as well as the wind speed around the center circulation for this to be considered potentially a subtropical storm. However, at the same time, it might be carried a little bit too much by the instability or baroclinic instability to the point where while it may have a wind speed that would be strong enough to be considered tropical storm status, it might not have enough tropical characteristics for this to be considered a tropical storm or even subtropical storm, just a more powerful mid-latitude low you typically see over the mid-latitudes of the Atlantic. So it's going to be a very close forecast to see if this develops, but the good news is that it's unlikely to impact any land. We do see that that this jet stream dip that's going on right over Canada and the strong westerly winds in general are definitely going to help steer this storm way out to sea. And we do have a ridge located right here, and this low pressure system is really going to tug on this tropical disturbance and steer it northward at a very quick rate and northeastward away from the coast, which is definitely good news. There could be an enhanced risk of high surf right around the eastern half of Canada, but it's going to be very limited. But still, don't underestimate it, because you definitely don't want to underestimate a rip current risk, even if the storm necessarily is hundreds of miles away and isn't very powerful. So definitely keep that in mind. And here are the strong upper level winds that I've been talking to you guys about over the past several minutes. We do see it right here. There's a big upper level trough located in this area, and the upper level winds are just very strong to a point where any tropical disturbance will likely struggle to strengthen very much. There's still that possibility, a good possibility, a tropical storm could develop, but it's unlikely that it'll strengthen much more than a weak tropical storm, the upper level winds are just too strong for this to strengthen much, and it should pretty much just fizzle out once it approaches, let's say, the latitude of France or the United Kingdom, where the sea temperatures really fall below the 80-degree threshold. So that's only good news. It won't have at least a very prolonged period where it's going to be a very strong storm, and it's likely to move out to sea, which is certainly good news. And you're probably wondering, how about the more long-term future of the northern Atlantic outside of these two disturbances, which likely won't have any direct impact to land? So if we were to take a look at the more long-term future of the northern Atlantic, the good news is that it seems like both of the two most reliable computer models, as well as some of the forecast centers, are expecting that at least for the beginning of August, things should be relatively quiet when it comes to tropical cyclone development, which is certainly a good time to be quiet because, of course, August is a very active month when it comes to tropical cyclone development. So even just the beginning of August being quieter than usual could make a big difference when it comes to the amount of tropical cyclones the Atlantic will experience. But moving forward, we do see the reason why the computer models aren't very confident that there's going to be a high amount of tropical cyclone development over the next several days is that there's going to be plenty of dry air dominating the main development region. There's going to be a strong ridge located just off the coast of Europe and a low pressure system located right around the Saharan desert. That's going to bring a strong bring a strong northeasterly flow. That's going to bring a lot of the Saharan dust further southward and a lot of that stable air further southward, as the ridging is just too much and there's just too much stability over the main development region for much tropical cyclone development to occur, and that's what the GFS model is expecting. And same goes, and the same story applies to the Gulf of Mexico as well as the Caribbean. We don't see much go on where there's just the dry air just becomes too much, and there's a decent amount of wind shear as well over the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico that should help inhibit tropical cyclone development at least for the foreseeable future. So that's at least something that is definitely great for news for much of the coast if you're along the coast of the northern Atlantic. But remember, the hurricane season could change quickly, so make sure to stay tuned or at least be aware for more updates, because you never know with the hurricane season. We see that the European model is forecasting much of the same things to occur right over the northern Atlantic. It expects the dry air to just be too much for these tropical waves coming off the African coasts for them to handle. You never know, maybe the forecast could change where there's less dry air than initially anticipated from the computer models. However, at this point, they're both leaning towards the dry air just being too much. So, but remember, with with any tropical wave that comes off the West African coast, you never know. Things could change quickly, and so could the forecast. So maybe if there's a little bit less dry air than usual, these could have a possibility of developing. But we're just gonna need to just wait and see if the computer models will shift their forecast to the point where we could say with more confidence a tropical cyclone could develop right over the main development region. However, based on what we're seeing right now, it's unlikely to occur, which is certainly good news. So here's a wave forecast over the northern Atlantic over the next several days, and we do see that the wave heights just off the United States coast should remain around average, maybe slightly increasing thanks to the potential existence of Tropical Storm Emily just off the coast. We're going to need to wait and see. However, outside of that, there's not really much to worry about. Maybe Eastern Canada could experience a higher risk of rip currents, but that's about it. And here's what the global tropics hazards outlook is stating at this time. We do see that for outside of the potential of Tropical Storm Emily that could potentially occur this week, there isn't really much else that the Climate Prediction Center is looking at as having a good possibility of tropical cyclone development, as it expects drier than average conditions right over the Caribbean, and same goes for a lot of the main development region. We do see that it's relatively quiet, and the Climate Prediction Center isn't forecasting any area in the long-term future, at least for the beginning of August, to have a good chance of tropical cyclone development, which is certainly good news. Here's what the GFS ensemble members are forecasting over the next 10 days, and we do see that some of these ensemble members do want to develop Tropical Storm Emily just off the United States coast. But however, even if this does develop, this won't impact land directly. But taking a look at the other ensemble members over the main development region, we do have a couple that want to develop a tropical storm, but these are heavy outliers, so I'd still take it with a huge grain of salt. But it's at least a possibility to be aware of over the next several days and potentially weeks. So in terms of my overall forecast, in terms of any future tropical cyclone potential over the main development region, as of right now, I'll say it's very low for the beginning portion of August, but still stay tuned for further updates. And Tropical Storm Emily is certainly possible, just depends on if it's able to develop enough of a closed center of circulation, if the upper level winds won't be as strong as anticipated, and if it'll be able to absorb enough of the warm waters before it moves northward. But whether it develops or not, it's unlikely to impact land. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.